Welcome back to another deep dive into the labyrinth of video game lore. Today we're stepping into one of the most enigmatic, haunting, and philosophically dense worlds ever created in gaming. We're talking about Death Stranding, Hideo Kojima's first project after his departure from Konami, a game that divided audiences, sparked endless debates, and left players both mesmerized and bewildered in equal measure. This is a world where the living and the dead exist in an uneasy overlap, where rain ages everything it touches, where invisible creatures hunt the remnants of humanity, and where a lone courier must traverse a fractured America to reconnect what remains of civilization. The story of Death Stranding is layered, complex, and often deliberately opaque, filled with metaphors about connection, isolation, life, death, and what it means to persist in the face of inevitable extinction. Over the next portion of this exploration, we'll unravel every thread of this intricate narrative. We'll examine the cataclysm that shattered the world, the metaphysical realms that connect life and death, the creatures that haunt the landscape, the characters who drive the story forward, and the philosophical questions that linger long after the credits roll. This is the complete story and lore of Death Stranding. To understand Death Stranding's world, we must first understand the event that gave it its name. The Death Stranding wasn't merely an apocalypse in the traditional sense. It wasn't nuclear war or environmental collapse or alien invasion. Instead, it was something far stranger and more existentially terrifying. It was the moment when the barrier between life and death began to dissolve, when the world of the living became entangled with the realm of the dead. Before the Death Stranding, death was a one-way journey. When someone died, their soul departed their body and moved on to whatever awaited beyond. There was a clear boundary, a natural order to the transition from life to death. But that boundary shattered, and when it did, everything changed. The Death Stranding began with a series of mysterious explosions across the globe. These weren't conventional explosions caused by bombs or natural disasters. They were void-outs. Catastrophic antimatter annihilation events triggered when the souls of the deceased failed to properly transition to the afterlife. Instead of moving on, these souls became trapped, stranded between worlds, and their desperate attempts to return to their bodies created devastating reactions. According to in-game documents titled "From the Report on the Void-Out in Manhattan," the first recorded void-out occurred on the island of Manhattan. A surgeon specializing in cesarean sections performed a procedure on a brain-dead pregnant woman who was 7 months into her pregnancy. The woman had been placed on life support, but her blood pressure was decreasing and the fetus showed signs of bradycardia, prompting the decision to operate. The procedure was broadcast on a closed-circuit network to medical researchers, providing a record of what transpired. During this surgery, when the surgeon touched the umbilical cord connecting the unborn child to its brain-dead mother, he saw something impossible. He witnessed a beached thing, one of the spectral entities from the other side. This umbilical cord unknowingly served as a connection between the child and the world of the dead. When the surgeon made contact with what he had seen, the encounter triggered a void-out that devastated the surrounding area. This was humanity's first glimpse of the phenomenon that would come to be known as the Death Stranding, though the full scope of the catastrophe was yet to unfold. But the Death Stranding wasn't truly an accident or a random occurrence. It was, in truth, the manifestation of something far more ancient and cosmic. Throughout Earth's history, there have been 5 major mass extinction events: the extinction of the trilobites, the devastation that ended the dinosaurs, the ice ages that wiped out the mammoths. Each of these cataclysms was brought about by what the characters in Death Stranding call an extinction entity, a being whose very existence serves as a bridge between life and death, whose purpose is to usher in the end of one age and the beginning of another. The current Death Stranding represents the 6th such event, and its extinction entity walks among humanity, hidden in plain sight for much of the story. But we'll return to that revelation later. For now, what matters is understanding how the Death Stranding unfolded and intensified. The Manhattan Void-Out was just the beginning, the first sign that something fundamental had changed in the relationship between life and death. The incident sparked government-led investigations, known as the BB experiments, attempts to understand what had happened and how to detect these invisible entities. The government theorized that by recreating the same conditions that produced the first void out, a brain-dead mother, a fetus, and an umbilical cord, they could detect BTS and solve the mystery of the Death Stranding. These experiments continued in secret at a Manhattan facility until a catastrophic void out destroyed the entire island, killing the sitting US president who had been present to observe the research. Following this disaster, the BB program was officially terminated due to the risk of triggering additional void outs, though Bridget Strand, who succeeded the deceased president, continued the program in secret. But the true catalyst for the Death Stranding as we know it came later through an act meant to preserve life that instead upset the cosmic balance. When a child who should have stayed dead was brought back from the beach, when the soul and body were reunited in defiance of natural law, the barrier between the worlds of the living and the dead weakened catastrophically. This single act of resurrection set in motion the events that would transform scattered void outs into a global phenomenon. In the aftermath, the world descended into chaos. Void outs occurred across the globe, destroying cities and settlements. The barrier between the living world and the realm of death had become permeable, and souls that should have moved on instead became trapped, transforming into beached things that posed a constant invisible threat to anyone who ventured outside. Rain and snow transformed into timefall, precipitation that rapidly accelerates the flow of time on whatever it touches. Cargo rusts and decays in minutes. Plants wither and die, human skin ages decades in moments. The very sky became hostile, making the outside world a place of constant peril. Humanity responded by retreating. The great cities emptied. Survivors built underground bunkers and shelters, sealed themselves away from the dangers that now prowled the surface. The United States, once a connected nation, fractured into isolated pockets of civilization. These settlements, called not cities, became self-sufficient fortresses where people lived in fear, cut off not just from each other, but from the very concept of a unified society. The infrastructure that once bound America together crumbled. Roads fell into disrepair. Communication networks failed. The government struggled to maintain any semblance of authority. In this new world, the most valuable people weren't politicians or CEOs or celebrities. They were porters, the couriers who braved the dangers of the outside world to deliver supplies, maintain tenuous connections between settlements, and keep the embers of civilization from guttering out entirely. This is the world into which Sam Porter Bridges steps. A world where death doesn't end, where the boundary between existence and oblivion has become dangerously thin, where humanity clings to survival in isolated pockets, and where the very act of connection has become both humanity's greatest hope and potentially its final doom. Central to understanding Death Stranding's metaphysical framework is the concept of the beach. This isn't a physical location that you can visit by traveling to a specific place on Earth. Instead, the beach is a liminal space, a threshold that exists between the world of the living and whatever lies beyond death. It's purgatory, waiting room, and personal afterlife, all rolled into one strange, surreal manifestation. When a person dies in the world of Death Stranding, their soul doesn't immediately transition to the afterlife. Instead, it first arrives at the beach. For most people, this is simply a transitory space, a place their consciousness passes through on the journey to whatever comes next. But after the Death Stranding event, this simple transition became complicated, and the beach became something far more significant and dangerous. Every person who has ever lived has their own personal beach. These spaces are unique to each individual, shaped by their consciousness, their conception of death, their memories and psychology. Most beaches take the form of a shoreline, dark sand stretching beneath a cloudy sky, waves lapping at the edge where land meets water. The ocean represents the true void of death, the final transition. The shore is the last point of contact with the world of the living. But while most beaches share these common characteristics, they're deeply personal spaces. Some are vast and empty. Others are cluttered with the detritus of memories. The sky might be stormy or calm. The landscape might be flat or mountainous. What appears on each person's beach reflects something fundamental about who they are and how they understand mortality. One of the most striking features of many beaches is the presence of stranded marine life. Whales, dolphins, fish, crustaceans, all beached on the shore, unable to return to the ocean. This imagery is deliberate and symbolic. Just as these creatures have become stranded far from the water that sustains them, so too have human souls become stranded between life and death, unable to complete their journey. It's from this imagery that the term Death Stranding derives its second layer of meaning. Not just the event itself, but the state of being caught between worlds, stranded on the shore between existence and oblivion. In the world before the Death Stranding, the beach was simply a metaphysical way station. Souls passed through briefly and moved on, but after the cataclysm, the beach became something more active and present in the world of the living. The boundary weakened, the two realms began to overlap, and certain individuals found themselves able to access their beach without dying, to visit this liminal space while still very much alive. Time behaves strangely on the beach. Or perhaps more accurately, time doesn't behave at all. The beach exists outside the normal flow of temporal progression. Past, present, and future blur together. For those who spend time on the beach, centuries might pass subjectively, while only moments elapse in the living world. This temporal distortion becomes crucial to several plot points, particularly regarding characters who exist partially or entirely on their own beaches. The beach also serves as a repository of information. Because time doesn't function normally there, because it exists as a sort of metaphysical crossroads, the beach contains access to knowledge from across history. Someone spending time on their beach could, theoretically, access information from any point in time. This property makes the beach invaluable for research, for understanding the past, and for attempting to divine the future. But the beach isn't just a passive space. It's actively connected to the world of the living through what the game calls strands or umbilical cords. These metaphysical tethers link a person's beach to their physical body in the living world. As long as the strand remains intact, a person can return from their beach to their body. But if that strand is severed, or if someone dies while their soul is on the beach, they become trapped there, unable to return. This is what creates beached things. When a person dies and their soul fails to properly transition through the beach to the afterlife, when they become stuck on that liminal shore, their desperation to return to the living world transforms them into something else. They become BTS, invisible entities that maintain a connection to the beach through spectral umbilical cords, forever seeking to drag the living back to the realm of death with them. Certain individuals possess what's called dooms, a condition that grants them a heightened connection to the beach and the realm of death. Those with dooms can sense BTS. Some can see them, the most powerful can even control them. This connection to the other side comes with a price. Dooms, sufferers experience nightmares, visions of extinction, an overwhelming sense that the world is ending. Many develop suicidal tendencies, as if the beach itself is calling them home. Among the various beaches that exist, one stands apart from all the others. It's not personal to any individual living human. Instead, it's what might be called the master beach, a higher-level space that exists above and beyond the personal beaches of ordinary people. This beach belongs to the extinction entity, the being whose purpose is to usher in the next mass extinction. And it's through this beach, through its connection to every other beach that exists, that the final cataclysm, the last stranding, threatens to unfold. Understanding the beach is essential to understanding Death Stranding's story, because so much of the plot revolves around this space and its properties. The chiral network that Sam works to construct uses the beach as its transmission medium, routing data through a place where time doesn't exist to achieve instantaneous communication. The visions Sam experiences throughout his journey are glimpses of other beaches, memories trapped in that liminal space, accessible because of his unique connection to the other side. The final confrontation between Sam and Amelie takes place on a beach, in that realm between worlds where the fate of humanity hangs in the balance. The beach represents Kojima's meditation on death, on the space between being and non-being, on what it means to be caught between worlds. It's purgatory as metaphysical infrastructure, the afterlife as a place with practical applications, death as a realm that can be visited and explored. And in a game about connection, about bridging the gaps between isolated individuals and communities, the beach serves as the ultimate bridge, the ultimate connection, the thread that links all of humanity in death, as surely as the chiral network seeks to link them in life. Of all the horrors that emerged in the wake of the Death Stranding, none inspire more fear than beached things. These spectral entities, often abbreviated simply as BTS, represent the most immediate and terrifying danger facing anyone who ventures into the outside world. They are the souls of the dead, trapped between life and death, unable to move on to whatever awaits beyond the beach. And they are invisible, undetectable by ordinary human senses, making them all the more nightmarish. To understand BTS, we must understand the process by which they come into being. In the world before the Death Stranding, when a person died, their soul, what the game calls the car, would separate from their body, the ha. The car would then journey to the beach, and from there, transition to the afterlife. It was a natural process, as inevitable as the setting of the sun. But the Death Stranding disrupted this process fundamentally. Now, when someone dies, their car doesn't immediately depart. Instead, it lingers, tethered to the ha by an invisible umbilical cord, attempting to return to the body it once inhabited. If the body isn't destroyed quickly, typically through cremation, the car will successfully return. But when it does, it doesn't resurrect the deceased. Instead, it creates something else entirely. The body undergoes a process called necrosis, and the reunited car and ha transform into a beached thing. BTs aren't mindless. They retain some fragment of the person they once were, though that fragment is twisted, corrupted by their state of existing between worlds. They're described as suffering, trapped in a form they never chose, unable to complete their journey to the true afterlife. The sounds Sam hears when BTS are near, the eerie clicking and crying, these aren't just ambient noise. They're the sounds of anguish, the audible manifestation of beings in eternal torment. What makes BTS particularly dangerous is their composition. Within their spectral forms exists antimatter, the substance of death itself. Matter is associated with life, with existence, with the world of the living. Antimatter represents the opposite, the realm of death, of non-being. And when a BT consumes a living person, when the antimatter within the BT comes into contact with the matter of a living human, the result is a void-out. A void-out is an antimatter annihilation event on a massive scale. When matter and antimatter meet, they explosively convert into pure energy. The process is extraordinarily efficient, far more so than any nuclear reaction. A single void-out can obliterate entire city blocks, leaving behind nothing but a massive crater. After the Death Stranding, these explosions became common enough that humanity had to completely restructure society to prevent them. This is why the dead are treated with such extreme caution in this world. When someone dies, their body must be transported to an incinerator and completely destroyed within a specific time window. If the body isn't incinerated before the car returns, before necrosis sets in, a BT will form. And that BT, desperate and suffering, will seek out the living, will attempt to consume them, will trigger a void-out that destroys everything nearby. Not all BTS are created equal. They manifest in different forms, with different capabilities and levels of danger. The most common type are called gazers. These floating entities appear during timefall events, hovering invisibly above the ground. Gazers are attracted to sound and movement. If you remain still and hold your breath, a gazer might pass nearby without detecting you, but make a noise, take a step at the wrong moment, and they'll sense your presence. When a gazer detects a living person, the situation escalates. Hunters emerge from the tar-like substance that appears wherever BTS manifest. These entities appear as handprints, crawling across the ground, reaching up to grab their prey. If hunters successfully pull their victim down into the tar, something even worse manifests. Catchers are massive, nightmarish BTS that appear in a variety of forms. Some resemble grotesque aquatic creatures, all tentacles and gaping maws. Others take the shape of corrupted land animals, lions or other predators, twisted into something unnatural. These creatures are boss-level threats, capable of consuming victims and triggering void-outs that can devastate the surrounding area. In some cases, BTS can become even larger and more dangerous. Colossal BTS are enormous humanoid figures, visible even to those without special abilities, towering over the landscape like living monuments to death. These massive entities are typically created or summoned by individuals with extremely high DOOMS levels. Higgs Monaghan, one of the game's antagonists, demonstrates this ability multiple times, calling forth colossal BTs that threaten to consume entire settlements. There are also Leviathan BTS, massive flying entities that patrol the tar belts, and various other specialized forms. Each type of BT presents its own challenges, its own dangers, but they all share that same fundamental threat. Get caught by a BT, get consumed, and you trigger a void out. You, everything around you, everyone nearby, all of it converted to energy in an instant, leaving nothing but a crater and the lingering presence of more BTS drawn to the site of death. For most people in this world, BTS are completely invisible. The human senses simply can't perceive them. This is what makes them so terrifying. You could be walking through an open field on a clear day, and suddenly timefall begins, and you're surrounded by invisible entities that will kill you if you make a sound. Most people don't survive their first encounter with BTS unless they have protection. This is where bridge babies come in, but we'll explore that technology more deeply in a later section. What matters for now is understanding that BTS can be detected by those with the DOOMS condition or by those connected to a bridge baby. When detected, BTS appear as dark, oily silhouettes, humanoid figures trailing spectral umbilical cords that stretch away into the distance, connecting them to the beach. These umbilical cords are crucial. They're what tether the BT to the other side, what allows it to manifest in the world of the living. Sever that cord and the BT is sent back to the beach, released from its tormented existence in the liminal space between worlds. This is one method of dealing with BTS, though it requires getting close enough to cut the cord, which is extraordinarily dangerous. Alternatively, BTS can be repelled or temporarily dispelled using bodily fluids from repatriates, individuals who can return from death. Blood, sweat, urine, even excrement from a repatriate has the property of driving BTS away, pushing them back toward the beach. Various weapons have been developed that utilize these fluids. Hematic grenades, blood-based ammunition, tools designed to give porters and others a fighting chance against the invisible threat. But perhaps the most unsettling aspect of BTS isn't their danger or their invisibility. It's what they represent. Each BT was once a person, someone with a life, with hopes and dreams and fears. And now they exist in a state of eternal suffering, trapped between worlds, unable to rest, unable to die, unable to do anything but reach for the living, in a desperate attempt to reclaim what they've lost. They're victims of the Death Stranding as much as anyone else, perhaps more so. The existence of BTS has fundamentally reshaped human society and psychology in this world. Death isn't an ending anymore. It's a transformation into something horrible. The fear of becoming a BT, of being trapped in that liminal space, haunts everyone. This is why bodies are cremated so quickly, why the dead are handled with such extreme caution. It's not just about preventing void-outs. It's about ensuring that the deceased can truly die, can truly move on, rather than becoming trapped in an existence worse than death itself. In the world after the Death Stranding, some individuals found themselves changed, gifted with abilities that connected them more deeply to the beach and the realm of death. This condition came to be known as DOOMS, though whether the term is an acronym or simply a word remains ambiguous. What's certain is that DOOMS represents both a curse and a gift, granting those who possess it supernatural abilities while also burdening them with nightmares, visions, and a pervasive sense that extinction looms on the horizon. DOOMS manifests differently in different people, with varying levels of severity and capability. The condition is classified on a scale, with higher levels indicating stronger connections to the other side and more potent abilities. Someone with level 2 DOOMS, like Sam Porter Bridges, can sense when BTS are nearby. They experience a physical reaction, a rash that spreads across their skin, tears streaming from their eyes despite feeling no sadness. These are allergic responses to the presence of chiralium, the exotic matter associated with BTS and the beach. At level 2, the sufferer can detect BTS but not see them without assistance. This is where bridge babies become essential, providing the additional connection needed to actually visualize the invisible entities. But individuals with higher DOOMS levels possess greater capabilities. Fragile, a character we'll explore in depth later, has a DOOMS level that allows her not only to see BTs unaided, but also to teleport by temporarily shifting through her own beach, traveling vast distances instantaneously. Higgs Monaghan possesses extraordinary DOOMS abilities far beyond what most sufferers display. According to game lore, Higgs originally had DOOMS capabilities that were then significantly enhanced by Amelie, the extinction entity. She artificially amplified his powers, elevating him far beyond what his natural abilities would allow. With these enhanced capabilities, Higgs can summon and control BTS, calling them forth like puppets, directing them to attack his enemies. He can manipulate the tar-like substance that appears during BT manifestations. He can create localized timefall events. His connection to the beach, amplified by Amelie's intervention, makes him essentially a conduit for death itself, able to weaponize the very phenomena that threaten humanity. But DOOMS isn't just about abilities. It comes with significant downsides. Those with DOOMS suffer from what's called chiral contamination, a condition caused by extended exposure to chiralium. Symptoms include vivid apocalyptic nightmares, poor sleep quality, depression, and suicidal ideation. In extreme cases, contamination can lead to death or to destructive impulses toward oneself or others. The terrorist group known as Homo Demens, which we'll discuss later, consists largely of individuals suffering from severe chiral contamination. Their minds warped by constant exposure to the substance of death. They've come to see extinction not as a threat, but as something to be welcomed, even accelerated. Their ideology of destruction stems at least partially from the mental degradation caused by their proximity to the beach. DOOMS also affects those who possess it in more subtle ways. Many DOOMS sufferers report feeling disconnected from other people, struggling to form emotional bonds, experiencing a sense of isolation even in crowds. This might be a psychological response to their nightmares and visions, or it might be something more fundamental, as if their connection to death makes it harder for them to connect with life. Interestingly, certain birth dates seem to correlate with stronger DOOMS abilities. Statistical analysis within the game world has shown that those born under specific constellations, particularly Cancer, Pisces, Cetus, Delphinus, and Gigas, tend to manifest higher levels of DOOMS. Whether this is truly astrological or simply coincidental remains unclear, but it's a detail that adds to the mystical atmosphere surrounding the condition. DOOMS is believed to have originated with or been spread by the extinction entity, specifically by Amelie. When she brought Sam back from death as an infant, when she made him the first repatriate, that act of disrupting the natural balance between life and death sent ripples through the world. DOOMS began manifesting in people across America and potentially beyond, as if Sam's resurrection had infected humanity with a condition that made them more sensitive to the beach, more connected to death. This brings us to repatriation, a phenomenon closely related to DOOMS, but distinct in its mechanics and implications. A repatriate is someone who can return from death, who possesses the ability to resurrect their physical body after their ka has separated from their ha. In practical terms, a repatriate is functionally immortal, capable of coming back from injuries that would kill anyone else, even surviving void-outs that should obliterate them completely. Sam Porter Bridges is the first and most prominent repatriate in the game. When Sam dies, his consciousness travels to a place called the Seam, a dark underwater-like space that exists between the world of the living and the beach. In the Seam, Sam appears to be submerged, surrounded by darkness, and he must swim upward toward a glowing point of light. Reach that light, and he returns to his body in the world of the living, fully healed from whatever killed him. The process of repatriation is uncomfortable at best. When Sam returns to life, he often vomits up a mixture of tar and cryptobiotes, small arthropod-like creatures that seem to exist on the boundary between life and death. His body reconstructs itself, wounds healing impossibly fast, broken bones setting instantly. It's a profoundly unnatural process, one that defies every law of biology and physics. Repatriates are extraordinarily rare. Sam was artificially created as a repatriate through Amelie's intervention when he died as an infant. His daughter Lou, whom he rescues at the game's conclusion, is revealed to also be a repatriate, though the exact mechanism of how she gained this remains somewhat ambiguous. Hartman mentions having come across old reports of other repatriates, suggesting the phenomenon may have existed before Sam, but if so, it was even rarer than in the post-Stranding world. Interestingly, when a repatriate is killed by a BT, when they're consumed and trigger a void-out, the explosion is consistently smaller than it should be. It's theorized that this is because some of the energy is diverted to the beach, that the repatriate's unique connection to the other side siphons off a portion of the antimatter reaction. This makes repatriates slightly safer to have around, though a void-out caused by a repatriate is still devastatingly destructive. The existence of repatriates raises profound questions about the nature of death, consciousness, and resurrection. If someone can return from death repeatedly, are they truly dying each time? Is the person who returns the same as the person who died, or is each repatriation creating a new individual with the memories of the previous one? The game doesn't provide definitive answers to these questions, leaving them as philosophical puzzles for players to contemplate. What's clear is that both dooms and repatriation represent humanity's changing relationship with death in the aftermath of the Stranding. Where death was once final, absolute, the boundary between life and non-being, it has become something more fluid, more negotiable. Some people can sense death's presence, some can see it, some can control it, and a very few can die and return, can cross the threshold and come back. These abilities are necessary for survival in this new world. Without dooms, sufferers to detect BTs, without repatriates who can venture into dangerous areas with less risk, humanity would be even more isolated, even more vulnerable. But these gifts come at a terrible cost, psychological and sometimes physical, and those who possess them often wish they didn't. They are connected to death in ways that make life itself harder to embrace, harder to enjoy, harder to hold on to. Among all the disturbing elements of Death Stranding's world, perhaps none is more unsettling than the Bridge Baby program. These are infants, removed from brain-dead mothers before they're viable, kept alive in artificial wombs and used as equipment, as tools to detect the invisible threat of BTS. The ethics of this practice are never truly addressed in a satisfactory way within the world of the game, which makes sense. In a civilization fighting for survival, desperate measures become normalized, and the horror of what's being done often goes unexamined. A Bridge Baby, commonly abbreviated as BB, exists in a unique state. The fetus is extracted from a mother who has suffered brain death, typically during her third trimester. At this stage, the child is developed enough to survive outside the womb with proper support, but still early enough that the mother's brain death state creates a unique condition. The mother, being clinically brain dead, exists partially on the beach, in that liminal space between life and death, and the baby, still connected to her, shares that connection. This gives the BB a foot in both worlds. It's alive, but it's also connected to the realm of death through its still mother. This dual existence allows the BB to perceive things that ordinary humans cannot. When connected to someone, particularly someone with dooms, the BB enables them to see BTs, to visualize the invisible entities that would otherwise remain completely undetectable. The BBS are kept in pods that simulate the womb environment, artificial containers filled with fluid, maintaining the proper temperature and providing necessary nutrients. These pods are equipped with monitoring systems that track the BB's stress levels, its vital signs, its connection stability. When the BB becomes too stressed, it needs to be soothed, calmed through rocking motions or by connecting to the pod's management system. Porters carry these pods on their chests, positioned over the heart, where the movement and the heartbeat can provide comfort to the BB. The pods are networked into the porter's suit and equipment, allowing the BB's perceptions to be translated into actionable data. When a BB detects a BT, the Odradek, a mechanical sensor worn on the porter's shoulder, activates and points toward the threat. From a utilitarian perspective, the BB program is a remarkable success. It's given porters and others the ability to navigate BT-infested areas with relative safety. Before BBS, encountering BTS was a death sentence for most people. With a BB, a skilled porter can avoid or even combat these entities. The program has undoubtedly saved countless lives, enabled crucial deliveries, helped maintain the tenuous connections between isolated settlements. But from an ethical perspective, the BB program is an abomination. These are infants, human children, being used as equipment. They're assigned ID numbers instead of names. They're treated as replaceable tools rather than as people. The official Bridges policy is that BBS should never be considered as anything more than technology, that porters shouldn't form emotional attachments to them. This policy exists because BBS have a limited lifespan in this artificial state. Eventually, their connection to their still mother weakens and fails. When this happens, they begin to die. Standard procedure is to incinerate the BB before it can necrotize, before it can turn into a BT. The death of a BB is treated as the disposal of malfunctioning equipment, not as the death of a child. Sam's relationship with his BB, whom he nicknames Lou, represents a rejection of this dehumanizing policy. Despite being told repeatedly not to form an attachment, despite being warned that the BB is just a tool, Sam grows to care for Lou deeply. He talks to Lou, soothes the child when stressed, celebrates small moments of connection. Over the course of their journey together, they form what can only be described as a parent-child bond. This bond becomes central to the game's emotional core. When Lou begins to die toward the end of the story, when Sam is ordered to incinerate the child, he refuses. In an act of defiance against Bridges, against the utilitarian logic that treats children as equipment, Sam removes Lou from the pod and attempts to save the child through simple human care. It's arguably the most human moment in the entire game, a rejection of cold pragmatism in favor of love and connection. The existence of the BB program also reveals uncomfortable truths about Bridges as an organization and about the sacrifices deemed acceptable in the name of survival. To create BBS, they need brain-dead pregnant mothers, referred to as still mothers. This raises immediate questions about how these women came to be in this condition. Die Hardman makes reference to the mothers having been complicit in the program, suggesting they may have volunteered, knowing what would happen. But the ethics of such a choice, the desperation that would drive someone to consent to having their child used in this way, these aren't explored in any satisfying depth. The BB technology was pioneered by Bridget Strand, the president of the United Cities of America and Sam's adoptive mother. She envisioned the program as crucial to reconnecting America, to giving people the tools they needed to survive in a BT-infested world. But her first test subject wasn't a volunteer. It was Sam himself, who, as an infant, became the first bridge baby, extracted from his dying mother and placed into the program before anyone fully understood what they were creating. This revelation, when it comes late in the game, recontextualizes everything. Sam's connection to Lou isn't just about forming a bond with a child in his care. It's about recognizing himself in that situation, about understanding what it means to have been used as a tool, to have been treated as equipment rather than as a person. When Sam saves Lou, when he refuses to incinerate the child, he's not just saving Lou, he's retroactively giving himself the care and recognition he never received as a child. The BB program also ties into the broader questions the game asks about the relationship between technology and humanity, about the sacrifices we're willing to make in the name of progress or survival, about where the line is between acceptable and unacceptable means to an end. Bridge babies keep people alive. They enable connection. They serve a vital function. But at what cost? At what point does the utility of a technology cease to justify its ethical compromises? These questions linger throughout the game, never fully answered, perhaps because there are no satisfying answers. The BBS exist. They're necessary, and their children treated as objects, and that will never be okay no matter how crucial their function. It's a moral knot that can't be untied, only acknowledged. And Sam's choice to save Lou represents not a solution, but a refusal to continue accepting the unacceptable. At the center of Death Stranding's sprawling narrative stands Sam Porter Bridges, a man who wants nothing more than to be left alone but finds himself drafted into a mission to reconnect a shattered nation. Portrayed by Norman Reedus, Sam is a complex protagonist, defined as much by his desire to avoid connection as by his ultimate acceptance of it. Understanding Sam means understanding the man he becomes over the course of the game, but also understanding the traumas and secrets that shape who he is at the journey's beginning. Sam's defining characteristic, at least initially, is his aphantosemphobia, his fear of physical contact with others. This isn't a quirk or an eccentricity. It's a genuine psychological condition that causes Sam intense distress when touched. His hands shake. He becomes visibly uncomfortable. He avoids situations where physical contact might occur. This fear extends to emotional connection as well. Sam has isolated himself, cut ties with others, built walls between himself and the rest of humanity. This isolation manifests in his choice of profession. Sam is a porter, a delivery person who travels alone across the dangerous landscape, bringing supplies to isolated settlements. It's perfect work for someone who wants minimal human contact. He picks up cargo, travels vast distances alone, drops off the packages, and leaves before having to engage in meaningful interaction. He's connected to people through his deliveries, fulfilling a vital function, but maintaining emotional distance at all times. But Sam's isolation isn't just about fear of touch or social anxiety. It's rooted in loss. We learn gradually that Sam's wife, Lucy, died along with their unborn daughter. The exact circumstances of their deaths aren't fully detailed in the first game, though the sequel reveals that Lucy committed suicide after learning disturbing truths about the Death Stranding and Bridget's plans for their unborn child. The trauma of losing them both shattered something in Sam, reinforced his desire to not form bonds that could be taken away. If you never connect, you can never lose what you've connected to. It's a defense mechanism, understandable but ultimately untenable. When the game begins, Sam is working as an independent porter, having left Bridges, the government organization his adoptive mother Bridget Strand founded and led. He wants nothing to do with Bridges or their mission to reconnect America. He's content to make his deliveries, exist on the periphery of society, and avoid the entanglements that connection brings. But then Bridget dies, and on her deathbed, she tasks Sam with a mission. She wants him to complete what she started, to travel from the East Coast to the West Coast of what remains of America, connecting isolated settlements to the chiral network, literally and figuratively bringing the nation back together. Sam initially refuses. He wants no part of this grand endeavor. But a series of events, including a void-out that destroys central Knot City and leaves Sam as one of the few survivors, ultimately compels him to accept. What makes Sam uniquely qualified for this mission isn't just his experience as a porter or his knowledge of the dangerous terrain. It's his status as a repatriate. Sam can die and return to life. This ability, which he's possessed since infancy, though he doesn't initially know why, makes him the ideal candidate to traverse BT-infested territory, to take risks that would be fatal for anyone else. Sam is also a doom sufferer, though at a relatively low level. He can sense BTS feel when they're near, but he can't see them without assistance. This is where his bridge baby, Lou, becomes essential. Connected to Lou, Sam gains the ability to perceive BTS, to navigate around them or engage them when necessary. The bond that forms between Sam and Lou becomes one of the emotional anchors of the game, a relationship that gradually breaks down Sam's walls and reminds him that connection, despite its risks, is what makes life meaningful. As Sam travels across America, from one Knot City to another, from the eastern region through the mountains and eventually to Edge Knot City on the west coast, he begins to change. Each settlement he connects adds to the chiral network, and in doing so, he forms relationships with the people he helps. Fragile, Heartman, Mama, Lockney, Deadman, and others all become not just colleagues or contacts, but something approaching friends. These relationships force Sam to confront his fear of connection, his desire for isolation. He can't maintain his emotional walls while simultaneously working to connect the entire nation. The act of bringing people together, of creating strands that link communities, reflects back on him. creating strands in his own life that he can't ignore or deny. One of the most significant relationships Sam forms, though he doesn't understand it for most of the game, is with Clifford Unger, the mysterious soldier who appears in visions and flashbacks. These sequences, which Sam experiences when connected to Lou, show Cliff with a BB, caring for the child, protecting it, fighting desperately to save it from Bridges operatives who want to use it in the BB program. For much of the game, it seems like these are Lou's memories, visions of her past that Sam is accessing through their connection, but the truth, revealed in the game's final act, is far more personal. These aren't Lou's memories, they're Sam's. Clifford Unger was Sam's father, and the BB that Cliff was protecting was Sam himself. This revelation recontextualizes everything about Sam's character. He wasn't just assigned to be a porter using a BB. He was the first BB, the prototype that proved the program could work. His mother, Lisa, was pregnant with him when she suffered an accident that left her brain dead. His father, Clifford, desperate to save his son, agreed to let Bridges attempt experimental procedures. They extracted Sam from Lisa's womb, made him the first Bridge baby, and used him to develop the technology that would eventually be deployed throughout the organization. Clifford eventually realized what was being done to his son, what Sam's future would be as equipment rather than as a child. He attempted to escape with Sam, to reclaim custody and give his son a chance at a normal life, but Bridges couldn't allow that. The program was too valuable. Die Hardman, who had served under Clifford in the military, was ordered to kill his former commander if Clifford tried to escape. That's exactly what happened. In a confrontation that plays out in flashback, Clifford attempted to flee with Sam, protecting his son from the soldiers sent to stop him. Bridget Strand herself gave the order to shoot. Die Hardman, who had served under Clifford and owed him his life, hesitated, unable to pull the trigger on his former commander. Bridget, seeing his hesitation, fired her own weapon, shooting Clifford and mortally wounding him. In the chaos of the confrontation, a stray bullet struck baby Sam, killing the infant. Clifford, holding his dying son, collapsed moments later. Both father and son died together in that facility, their bodies falling, their last moments stolen by the organization that had promised to save them. But Sam didn't stay dead. Amelie, who existed partially on the beach even then, found Sam's soul and brought him back. She couldn't save Clifford, couldn't undo what had been done, but she could give Sam life again. In doing so, she made him a repatriate, gave him the ability that would define his future. She also inadvertently triggered the full Death Stranding, upset the balance between life and death in a way that would reshape the world. This traumatic origin explains so much about Sam. His fear of touch might be partially psychological, but it's also tied to his status as a repatriate. As someone who has died and returned, his isolation isn't just about losing Lucy and his daughter. It's about never having truly belonged to himself, about having been used as equipment from the moment of his birth. His reluctance to help Bridges isn't just stubbornness, it's a justified resentment toward the organization that turned him into a tool, that killed his father, that took away any chance he might have had for a normal life. But it also explains why, despite all this, Sam ultimately chooses to help. Because the alternative, allowing humanity to remain fractured and isolated, means accepting the same isolation that was forced upon him as a child. By connecting America, by bringing people together, Sam creates the world he never got to live in himself. He ensures that others won't have to live in the kind of isolation that defined his early life. In the game's conclusion, after preventing the last stranding, after saving humanity from extinction, Sam makes a choice that encapsulates his entire character arc. He's told that Lou is dying, that the child needs to be incinerated. Instead of following this order, instead of treating Lou as equipment to be disposed of, Sam removes Lou from the pod and holds the child, giving Lou the human touch, the care and recognition that he himself was denied. When Lou survives, when the child returns to life, Sam becomes a father, not through biological relation, but through choice. He raises Lou, whose full name is revealed to be Louise, forms the family he lost, gives the child the childhood he never had. It's a moment of profound healing. Sam finally allowing himself to connect fully with another person, accepting the vulnerability that comes with love, choosing connection over isolation despite all the pain that connection has brought him. Sam Porter Bridges begins the game as a man running from human connection, terrified of the pain it might bring. Scarred by losses he's suffered and traumas he doesn't fully remember. He ends the game as a father, as someone who has embraced connection despite its dangers, who has chosen love despite knowing that love makes you vulnerable. It's a complete transformation, and it's earned through every delivery, every interaction, every step of his journey across a broken America. Among all the characters in Death Stranding, few are more tragic than Clifford Unger, the soldier whose love for his son transcends death itself. Portrayed by Mads Mikkelsen, Cliff exists for most of the game as a mysterious antagonist, appearing in surreal sequences set in war zones from different eras, seemingly hunting for the BB that Sam carries. But as the truth about Cliff's identity and his connection to Sam unfolds, he transforms from an apparent villain into one of the most sympathetic characters in the narrative. Clifford Unger was a captain in the United States Army Special Forces, a decorated soldier who fought in multiple conflicts before the Death Stranding. He served in Iraq, Afghanistan, Kosovo, and other theaters of war, earning a reputation for bringing his unit home alive and unscathed every time. Among the soldiers under his command was John Blake McClane, who would later take the name Die Hard Man, a moniker that referred to Cliff's habit of saving him repeatedly, bringing him back from situations that should have killed him. Eventually, Cliff left active duty to be with his family. He'd married a woman named Lisa, and they were expecting a child. Cliff was ready to trade the soldier's life for fatherhood, to be present for his son in a way that would have been impossible if he'd remained in the military. It was meant to be a new beginning, a chance to build something beyond war and violence. But tragedy intervened. Cliff and Lisa were involved in an accident. The specifics are never fully detailed, but the outcome was devastating. Lisa survived physically but was left brain-dead, existing in a vegetative state with no hope of recovery. Worse, their unborn son was at risk. The baby wasn't viable yet, not developed enough to survive outside the womb. But Lisa's deteriorating condition meant waiting might result in losing him as well. Desperate to save something from the tragedy, Cliff turned to Bridges. The organization, led by Bridget Strand, was conducting experimental research into the beach, into the connection between life and death, and into ways of using that connection. They claimed they could save Lisa, could save their son, could find a way to keep them both alive through procedures that weren't yet fully understood. Cliff, seeing no other option, agreed. He brought Lisa and their unborn child to Bridges, trusting the organization to help his family. What he didn't fully understand was what help would mean in this context. Lisa remained brain-dead, kept alive artificially. And their son was extracted from her womb prematurely, placed into an artificial pod, and made the first test subject for what would become the Bridge Baby program. Initially, Cliff might have believed this was temporary, that it was a necessary step in some treatment that would eventually allow his son to live normally. He bonded with the child despite the artificial circumstances, visiting the pod regularly, talking to his son, singing to him, celebrating the milestones they should have shared under normal circumstances. On what would have been the baby's actual birth date, Cliff brought a cake to the facility, marking the occasion despite the impossible situation. But as time passed, Cliff began to understand what was really happening. His son wasn't going to be returned to him. The child, whom Bridges referred to simply as BB, was too valuable to the research program. They were learning crucial information about the beach, about BTS, about the connection between life and death, all through their experiments with this infant. Releasing the child, allowing Cliff to raise his son normally, wasn't part of the plan. Cliff reconnected with John, his former subordinate, who had taken a position in Bridges' security. John revealed a terrible truth. Bridges was planning to move the BB to another facility, somewhere Cliff wouldn't have access, somewhere he would effectively lose his son forever. John, conflicted by loyalty to both Bridges and his former commander, offered Cliff a chance to escape, warned him that he'd need to act soon if he wanted to save his son. But John also warned Cliff of the consequences. If Cliff attempted to flee with the BB, if he was caught, John would be ordered to stop him. And if ordered, John would follow those orders, even if it meant killing Cliff. It was a terrible situation, loyalty divided between duty and friendship. between following orders and doing what was right. Cliff made his choice. He would save his son, whatever the cost. He removed the baby from the pod, a desperate gamble. Removing a BB from its artificial womb carries significant risk, with game law suggesting a high probability of severe complications or death. But leaving his son in Bridges' custody was unacceptable. Cliff would rather risk death trying to save his child than abandon him to a life as equipment. The escape attempt failed. Soldiers surrounded Cliff. Bridget Strand herself gave the order to shoot, but when Die Hardman hesitated, unable to pull the trigger on the man who had saved his life countless times, Bridget fired her weapon. She shot Clifford, wounding him fatally. In the chaos, a stray bullet struck Sam, killing the infant. Clifford, holding his dying son, collapsed moments later. Both father and son died together in that facility, their bodies falling, their last moments stolen by the organization that had promised to save them. But death wasn't the end for Clifford Unger. His soul, his car, didn't transition properly to the afterlife. Instead, he became stranded on his beach, trapped in that liminal space between life and death. And there, in that realm outside normal time, Cliff continued his search for his son, unaware that Sam had been resurrected, unaware that decades had passed in the world of the living. The visions Sam experiences throughout the game, the sequences set in war zones from World War I, World War II, Vietnam, these are Cliff's beach. They're manifestations of his memories, of the wars he fought, twisted by his endless search for his lost child. When Cliff appears in these visions, summoning undead soldiers to fight Sam, it's not out of malice. He believes Sam has stolen his BB. He's trying to reclaim what was taken from him to reunite with his son. The tragedy is that Cliff is right, but in a way he doesn't understand. Sam is the BB. The child Cliff is searching for isn't Lou, it's Sam himself. Father is fighting son, neither understanding who the other is. Separated by death and time and the machinations of an organization that destroyed their lives. The resolution of this storyline is one of Death Stranding's most emotionally powerful moments. In their final confrontation, on a beach that resembles a battlefield, Cliff finally recognizes the truth. The BB he's been searching for, the son he lost, he's been fighting him all along. Sam has been his child all this time. Cliff's last moments are spent holding Sam, finally reunited after being torn apart. He tells Sam that becoming a father didn't make him scared, it made him brave. He apologizes for being late, for not saving him, for not being the father he wanted to be. And then, at peace, having finally found his son, Clifford Unger passes on to the true afterlife, released from his decades of searching. This revelation recontextualizes every encounter Sam had with Cliff. Every battle wasn't an attack, but a desperate attempt to reclaim his child. Every time Cliff appeared, he was driven by a father's love so strong that it persisted beyond death, so consuming that it became the defining characteristic of his beach. Clifford Unger wasn't a villain. He was a victim, someone who tried to do right by his family and was destroyed for it. The story of Cliff and Sam serves multiple purposes in Death Stranding's narrative. It's a meditation on parenthood, on the lengths parents will go to for their children, on the impossibility of fully protecting those you love. It's a commentary on institutional callousness, on organizations that use people as resources without regard for their humanity. It's an exploration of loss and grief, of how trauma can strand us in emotional spaces we can't escape. But more than anything, it's a story about connection, specifically the connection between parent and child. That bond, the game argues, is strong enough to persist beyond death, beyond time, beyond any barrier the universe might erect. When Sam chooses to save Lou at the game's conclusion, when he refuses to let the child be treated as equipment, he's honoring his father's memory, completing the rescue that Cliff attempted and died for. He's becoming the father to Lou that Clifford tried to be to him. Perhaps no reveal in Death Stranding is more significant or mind-bending than the truth about Bridget Strand and her daughter Amelie. These two figures, who initially appear to be simply the president of the United Cities of America and her daughter, the expedition leader working to reconnect the nation, turn out to be far more. They are, in fact, two halves of the same being, a single entity split between body and soul, between the world of the living and the beach. And more than that, they are humanity's extinction entity, the being whose existence marks the sixth and potentially final mass extinction event in Earth's history. Bridget Strand rose to power in the years following the Death Stranding, eventually becoming President of the United Cities of America. She presented herself as a visionary leader, someone dedicated to bringing the fractured nation back together, to restoring communication and connection between the isolated settlements scattered across the continent. She founded Bridges, the organization that would work toward this goal, developing the technology and infrastructure necessary to reconnect America. But Bridget carried a secret that extended back to her youth, long before she understood its true implications. In her early 20s, Bridget developed uterine cancer. During the surgery to address this condition, something extraordinary happened. Her soul, her ka, separated from her body, her ha. This wasn't death in the conventional sense. Both halves continued to exist, but in different realms. Bridget's body remained in the world of the living, recovering from surgery and eventually resuming a normal life. Her soul, however, took up residence on a beach, existing outside normal time in that liminal space between life and death. This soul came to be known as Amelie, and while Bridget's physical body aged naturally, pursuing education and then a political career, Amelie remained frozen in her early 20s, timeless on her beach. Because time doesn't flow normally on the beach, because past, present, and future exist simultaneously in that liminal space, Amelie's form ceased to age. This is why, despite being the same person, Amelie appears as a young woman, while Bridget aged into her later years. They are two halves of one being, separated across the boundary between worlds, one aging with time and one existing beyond it. To avoid suspicion and explain Amelie's existence, Bridget created an elaborate cover story. She claimed that Amelie was her daughter, born with a rare condition called locked-in syndrome that caused her soul to exist primarily on the beach. This fabrication allowed both halves of the extinction entity to operate in the world, working in tandem toward common goals while maintaining the illusion that they were separate individuals, mother and daughter rather than body and soul. It was only after this split, after both halves began to exist separately, that Bridget and Amelie discovered what they truly were. The nightmares began, visions of past extinctions, apocalyptic images of mass death stretching back through Earth's history. Through her unprecedented connection to the beach and the access to knowledge it provided, Amelie came to understand that she was something more than human. She was an extinction entity, the sixth in a line stretching back through the planet's history, beings whose very existence serves as a bridge between life and death, and whose purpose is to usher in mass extinction events. Throughout Earth's history, there have been 5 previous extinction entities, each corresponding to one of the 5 major mass extinction events that reshaped life on the planet: the trilobite, the ammonite, the dinosaur, the mammoth, the Iceman. Each of these beings served as a catalyst for their respective extinctions, and evidence of their existence can be found in the archives accessible through the beach. Under Bridget's leadership, Bridges pioneered several crucial technologies. The Bridge Baby program, despite its ethical implications, gave people the ability to detect and navigate around BTS. The chiral network, a communication system that uses the beach as its transmission medium, promised to allow instant data transfer across any distance. These innovations were meant to save humanity, to give civilization a fighting chance in a world where death itself had become weaponized. But understanding her purpose didn't mean accepting it. Bridget, or rather Amelie, her soul existing outside time on the beach, began to search for a way to avoid bringing about the extinction. She studied the previous extinction entities through the archives accessible on the beach, learning about the trilobite, the ammonite, the dinosaur, the mammoth, the Iceman. Each had caused a Death Stranding, each had triggered massive die-offs. But importantly, each had also chosen to let some life persist, had stopped short of total annihilation. This pattern suggested that extinction entities weren't simply destructive forces. They possessed will, choice, the ability to shape how their Death Stranding unfolded. Perhaps, Bridget theorized, she could delay the 6th extinction indefinitely, could find a way to spare humanity from the fate that awaited them. This hope became the driving force behind her actions, behind the founding of bridges, behind the development of the chiral network. There was a problem, though. Being an extinction entity who resisted their purpose came with consequences. Bridget's body, aging in the world of the living, while her soul remained timeless on the beach, deteriorated. The cancer that had caused her initial soul split continued to progress. She knew she didn't have much time left, that death was approaching, and when Bridget's body died, when that fragile tether to the living world was severed, Amelie would be free to complete her purpose, to trigger the last stranding, the final and complete extinction of all life on Earth. This is where Sam's mission comes into play, though he doesn't know it for most of the game. Amelie appears to Sam as a hologram, claiming to have been captured by terrorists in Edge Knot City on the West Coast. She pleads with him to complete the chiral network, to finish what she started, to reconnect America. She frames this as a rescue mission, as a way to save her and complete her mother's dying wish. But it's a deception, one of the most elaborate in the game. Amelie was never captured by terrorists. She is the terrorists, or at least she's their true leader, the being who gave Higgs Monaghan his powers and directed the actions of the Homo Demens. The terrorist attacks, the void-outs, the isolation of Edge Knot City, all of it was orchestrated by Amelie to serve her true purpose. The chiral network, that communication system meant to bring people together, to reconnect America. It's also the mechanism by which Amelie plans to trigger the last stranding. By connecting settlements to the network, Sam is unknowingly linking every person's individual beach to Amelie's master beach. When the network is complete, when everyone in America is connected, Amelie will be able to merge all those beaches into her own, creating a surge of energy powerful enough to overwhelm the barrier between life and death and flood the world with antimatter. The last stranding would be instantaneous and total. Every human on the planet would die, their souls dragged through to Amelie's beach, their bodies annihilated by antimatter reactions. The Earth itself scoured clean of life. It would be the end of everything, the final correction of the cosmic accident that led to life persisting in a universe that, according to Amelie's understanding, wants to return to net zero, to the state before the Big Bang, when existence hadn't yet begun. Why would Amelie do this when she spent so long trying to prevent extinction? The answer is complex and rooted in her unique existence. Amelie has been trapped on the beach, outside normal time, for decades from her perspective. She's alone there, isolated, unable to form real connections with others because she exists in a different realm. She's also burdened with the knowledge that extinction is inevitable. She can delay it, postpone it, give humanity a few more centuries or millennia, but eventually it will happen. The universe is attempting to correct itself, and nothing can permanently stop that process. Faced with this inevitability, Amelie came to a grim conclusion. If humanity is doomed to eventual extinction anyway, if she'll eventually lose the struggle to hold back the tide, why prolong the suffering? Why give people centuries more to build lives and connections and loves, only to have it all ripped away when the extinction finally comes? Better, she reasons, to end it quickly, cleanly, to make the last stranding happen now rather than prolonging the inevitable. It's a nihilistic philosophy, born from isolation and cosmic despair. Amelie has been alone for so long, has existed outside human time and human connection for so much of her existence, that she's lost sight of why life matters. She sees only the end, the single point of extinction that awaits humanity, rather than the line of life that leads to it, the experiences and connections and meanings that occur in the time between birth and death. This is what Sam must confront in the game's climax. He reaches Amelie's beach, the liminal space where she's been trapped, and she explains everything to him. She reveals her true identity as the extinction entity. She shows him the 5 previous EEs, manifestations that appear in the sky as ghostly figures. She explains that the chiral network has served its purpose, that humanity is connected and ready to be extinguished, that the last stranding is about to begin. And she gives Sam a choice. He can accept this, can sit with her on the beach and watch the world end. Or he can sever the connection between her beach and the living world, cutting her off, delaying the extinction. But doing so means abandoning Amelie, leaving her alone on her beach, for however long remains before the extinction eventually occurs anyway. It means accepting that he can't save her, that she must bear this burden in isolation. Sam chooses the third option, one that Amelie didn't account for. He chooses to embrace her, to offer connection and love instead of either resignation or abandonment. It's a profound moment, Sam offering the one thing Amelie has been denied throughout her existence as an EE. She's been isolated, set apart from humanity by her role, unable to form the connections she craves. And Sam, knowing all of this, knowing that she's the reason his father died, the reason he was turned into the first BB, the reason the Death Stranding happened at all, he still offers her compassion. This act of connection, of choosing love despite all the pain and betrayal, changes Amelie's perspective. She realizes that extinction isn't just an ending. It's an opportunity, a chance for something new to emerge, for life to adapt and persist and evolve. The previous extinction entities understood this, which is why they stopped short of total annihilation, why they allowed some life to survive their death strandings. Life's refusal to surrender, even in the face of extinction, is what makes it meaningful. Moved by Sam's compassion and reminded of life's value, Amelie makes a choice. She severs her own beach from the network, cutting herself off from the world of the living. This delays the last stranding indefinitely, giving humanity the chance to continue, to persist, to face whatever challenges await them. But it means Amelie must remain on her beach alone, holding back the tide of extinction for as long as she can, bearing the burden of her role in complete isolation. It's a bittersweet ending to Amelie's arc. She's saved humanity, but at the cost of condemning herself to eternal loneliness. She exists outside time, so from her perspective, the isolation will be endless. But she accepts this fate, acknowledging that this is what it means to be an extinction entity, to carry the weight of ending and beginning, to stand as the guardian between what is and what comes next. The story of Bridget and Amelie is ultimately about the burden of purpose, about what it means to be designated for a role you never chose, about the tension between what we're meant to do and what we choose to do. It's about isolation and connection, about how existing outside normal human interaction can warp one's perspective until extinction seems preferable to continued existence. And it's about hope, about the refusal to accept nihilism even when faced with inevitable endings, about finding meaning in the time we have rather than despairing over its eventual conclusion. At the heart of Death Stranding's narrative is a mission to reconnect America through a revolutionary communication technology called the chiral network. This system, developed by the twin sisters Mama and Lochner, represents both humanity's best hope for rebuilding civilization and, unknowingly to most, the mechanism that nearly triggers the extinction of all life. Understanding the chiral network means understanding both its technological marvel and its existential danger. Before the Death Stranding, the United States was connected through traditional communication infrastructure. Internet, phone networks, power grids, roads, all the systems that allow a modern nation to function as a cohesive whole. But the cataclysm destroyed much of this infrastructure. Void-outs obliterated cities and the communication hubs they contained. Timefall corroded exposed equipment. The danger of BTS made maintaining and repairing systems almost impossible. In the aftermath, America fragmented. Isolated settlements lost contact with each other. The federal government collapsed. What remained was a patchwork of independent communities, each self-sufficient by necessity, each cut off from the others. People lived their entire lives in underground bunkers, never meeting anyone from the settlement 50 miles away, never receiving news or information from beyond their immediate area. Bridget Strand, as president of the remnant government that would become the United Cities of America, recognized that this isolation was untenable. Without connection, without communication, humanity would continue to fracture until each settlement became its own isolated microcosm, unable to share resources, technology, or knowledge. Eventually, this fragmentation would doom the species to a slow death of entropy and stagnation. The chiral network was conceived as the solution. Unlike traditional communication systems that rely on physical infrastructure like fiber optic cables or radio towers, the chiral network uses the beach itself as its transmission medium. Because the beach exists outside normal time, because past, present, and future are simultaneous there, data routed through the beach can be transmitted instantaneously across any distance. Think of it like this. Traditional communication systems send information through physical space, and that transmission takes time, even if it's only microseconds. The chiral network bypasses physical space entirely, sending data through a realm where time doesn't flow. The information leaves one terminal, passes through the beach, and arrives at its destination in what appears to be the same instant, as if it traveled back in time to arrive when it was sent. This temporal manipulation allows for unprecedented data transfer speeds. Files that would take hours to transmit through traditional means transfer instantaneously through the chiral network. But more than just speed, the network can recover lost data, reconstruct information that should be gone forever. Because the beach contains echoes of all information that ever passed through it. The network essentially functions as time travel for data, allowing access to historical records that were lost in the cataclysm. The technology required to make this work is extraordinarily complex. Each settlement needs a terminal, a QPID that serves as the interface between the living world and the beach. These terminals must be physically connected to the network by someone who carries an activation key, essentially a special QPID necklace that initiates the connection. Once connected, the terminal establishes a chiral communication line, routing data through the beach. The network also enables something called chiralgrams, holographic projections that allow people in different locations to appear in the same space, conversing as if they're physically present. This technology becomes crucial for maintaining social connections in a world where physical travel is dangerous. People can meet, interact, form relationships without ever leaving their bunkers. But the chiral network isn't just about communication. It also enables the chiral printer technology, a form of three-dimensional printing that uses chiral matter to construct objects. A porter like Sam can carry blueprints for various tools and structures, and as long as he's within range of the chiral network, he can materialize these items using the printer. This makes long journeys more feasible, as porters don't need to carry every possible tool they might need. They can print what's necessary on site. The network was the brainchild of twin sisters Morlingen, called Mama and Lochner. Born conjoined at the head and later surgically separated, the sisters possessed a unique form of dooms that allowed them to communicate with each other telepathically across any distance. This innate connection gave them insight into how the beach could be used as a communication medium. Mama handled the hardware, designing the physical terminals and interfaces. Lochner wrote the software, the complex programming that routed data through the beach without corruption or loss. Together, they created something revolutionary, a network that could reconnect humanity without requiring the vulnerable infrastructure that had failed so catastrophically during the Stranding. The first expedition to deploy the network was led by Amelie, Bridget's daughter. She and a team of specialists traveled west from the eastern cities, making contact with isolated settlements, convincing them to join the United Cities of America, and installing QPID terminals at each location. The goal was to create a chain of connected settlements stretching from coast to coast, bringing the nation back together. This expedition succeeded in connecting much of the central region, but encountered problems when it reached the Western Territories. A massive tar belt appeared around Edge Knot City, created by Higgs Monaghan using his Doom's abilities. This barrier isolated the West Coast, preventing Amelie from completing her mission. She sent word that she'd been captured by terrorists, the Homo Demens, who opposed the UCA's efforts to reunite America. This is where Sam's mission begins. He's tasked with completing what Amelie started, traveling west, connecting the remaining settlements, and ultimately reaching Edge Knot City to rescue Amelie and finish the chiral network. It's framed as a heroic endeavor, bringing light to isolated communities, reconnecting families that have been separated, restoring communication and commerce and all the benefits of a connected society. But there's a dark side to the chiral network, one that nobody except Amelie fully understands. By using the beach as its transmission medium, the network doesn't just send data through that liminal space. It also causes the beaches of connected individuals to begin merging. As more settlements join the network, As more people's personal beaches become linked through the system, they all start to converge toward a single point: Amelie's beach, the master beach of the extinction entity. Each new connection adds to the chiral density in the area, increasing the concentration of chiralium in the atmosphere. This has negative effects, causing what are called chiral storms, localized reality distortions where Sam might find himself pulled through space and time. But more critically, it's building towards something catastrophic. When the network is complete, when every settlement in America is connected, Amelie will have access to every individual's beach. She'll be able to merge them all into her own, creating a massive surge of energy as countless souls are pulled through to her beach simultaneously. This is how the last stranding will be triggered, not through some external force, but through humanity's own efforts to reconnect, through the very technology meant to save them. This adds a tragic irony to Sam's mission. Every settlement he connects, every person he brings into the network, he's unknowingly building the infrastructure for humanity's extinction. The strands he creates, the connections he forges, they're not just metaphorical. They're literal tethers that will be used to drag everyone to Amelie's beach when she triggers the last stranding. Mama and Locken didn't know this when they created the network. They thought they were saving humanity, giving people the tools to rebuild. Even Amelie might not have fully understood the danger at first. She wanted to delay the extinction to give humanity more time. But as the network grew, as she felt the beaches beginning to merge, she realized what it meant. And instead of stopping, she chose to see the network through to completion, to use it for its unintended purpose. The chiral network serves multiple thematic purposes in Death Stranding's narrative. On one level, it's a literal plot device, the MacGuffin that drives Sam's journey across America. He has a concrete goal: connect the settlements, complete the network, rescue Amelie. This gives the gameplay a clear structure and purpose. On another level, the network represents the double-edged nature of connection. Bringing people together, forging bonds, these are presented as inherently good throughout most of the game. But connection also means vulnerability, means giving up independence, means accepting that you're now tied to others in ways that can be exploited. The network that brings light and communication to isolated settlements is the same network that almost destroys humanity. The chiral network also explores the relationship between technology and unintended consequences. Mama and Lockney created something revolutionary, something that could save civilization. But they didn't fully understand what they were building, didn't anticipate how it could be misused. This mirrors countless real-world examples of technologies that promised progress but brought unforeseen dangers. After Sam prevents the last stranding, after Amelie severs her beach from the network, the chiral network remains operational. It continues to serve its intended purpose, connecting settlements, facilitating communication, enabling the rebuilding of civilization. Die Hard Man, who becomes the president of the United Cities of America after Bridget's death, oversees the network's continued expansion. The technology that was nearly weaponized into an extinction tool returns to being simply a tool, neither good nor evil in itself, but shaped by the intentions of those who use it. It's a reminder that progress isn't about the technology we create, but about how we choose to deploy it. What values guide our use of the tools we develop? While Sam Porter Bridges serves as the protagonist and focal point of Death Stranding's narrative, his journey is enriched and shaped by the various characters he encounters along the way. Each of these supporting characters brings their own perspective on isolation, connection, loss, and survival. And through their interactions with Sam, they help transform him from a reluctant loner into someone willing to embrace the vulnerability that comes with human bonds. Perhaps the most significant of Sam's companions is Fragile, the enigmatic leader of Fragile Express, a private delivery company that operates throughout the fractured United States. Portrayed by Lea Seydoux, Fragile is a woman defined by betrayal, marked physically and emotionally by the actions of someone she trusted, yet still committed to connecting people and maintaining the strands that bind civilization together. Fragile possesses a high level of dooms, granting her extraordinary abilities. Most notably, she can teleport across vast distances by temporarily shifting through her own beach, a process she calls jumping. This ability makes her an incredibly effective porter, capable of delivering packages to locations that would take other porters days or weeks to reach. She can materialize in a settlement, drop off supplies, and vanish again before BTS or other threats can endanger her. But Fragile's most defining characteristic isn't her abilities. It's the scars she bears, both visible and invisible, from her encounter with Higgs Monaghan. Fragile and Higgs were once partners, working together to expand Fragile Express across the continent. They were more than business partners. There was a romantic connection, a bond built on shared goals and mutual understanding. Fragile trusted Higgs completely, believed in him, saw him as someone who shared her vision of bringing people together. That trust was devastated when Higgs, corrupted by Amelie and transformed into a terrorist, used Fragile's trust against her. During an attack on Middle Knot City, Higgs had Fragile unknowingly carry a thermonuclear device into the settlement. She believed she was delivering crucial supplies. In reality, she was being used as an unwitting bomb courier. Her reputation and her company's credibility weaponized to destroy an entire city. When Fragile discovered what Higgs had done, when she realized she'd been used to murder thousands of people, she had two choices. She could allow the bomb to detonate and destroy Middle Knot City, or she could expose herself to timefall while carrying the bomb away from the populated area. She chose the latter, sacrificing herself to save the city. The timefall aged most of her body decades in moments. Her skin withered and wrinkled, her physical appearance transformed from that of a young woman to someone appearing much older. Only her face, which she protected with an umbrella, retained its youthful appearance. The contrast is jarring and serves as a constant reminder of her sacrifice, a visible mark of betrayal and heroism combined. This experience left Fragile with a complicated relationship to connection. She was betrayed by someone she loved, used as a weapon against innocent people, scarred permanently for her choice to save others. By all rights, she should have retreated into isolation, should have given up on the idea that people can be trusted. But instead, she continues to operate Fragile Express, continues to make deliveries, continues to build connections between settlements, despite knowing how dangerous those connections can be. Fragile's relationship with Sam develops gradually throughout the game. She offers him assistance when he needs it, provides transportation through her jumping ability, shares information about Higgs and the Homo Demens. But there's also tension between them, born from their different approaches to connection. Sam actively avoids bonds with others, while Fragile insists on maintaining them despite her trauma. By the game's conclusion, Fragile gets her revenge against Higgs, stranding him on a beach where he'll experience the same kind of isolation and suffering he inflicted on others. But this revenge doesn't heal her scars or undo the betrayal. What does help is her continued choice to connect with others, to maintain Fragile Express, to work alongside Sam and the reformed Bridges organization to keep America connected. Fragile represents the courage required to remain open to connection after experiencing profound betrayal. Her scars are permanent, her trauma real and ongoing, but she refuses to let that trauma define her entire existence, refuses to allow one person's cruelty to justify cutting herself off from everyone else. In a game about the difficulty and necessity of connection, Fragile embodies the strength required to keep choosing vulnerability even after being hurt. Another crucial ally in Sam's journey is Heartman, a scientist portrayed by Nicholas Winding Refn, who exists in a unique state between life and death. Heartman's condition is perhaps the most bizarre in a game filled with strange phenomena. Every 21 minutes, his heart stops. He dies, clinically and completely. For 3 minutes, his soul travels to his beach, where he searches desperately for his deceased wife and daughter. Then, an automated defibrillator shocks him back to life, and the cycle begins again. This pattern has repeated thousands of times. Heartman has died and been resurrected more than anyone else in the world, except perhaps Sam himself. The constant strain on his heart has deformed the organ, damaged it in ways that would be fatal if not for the medical equipment that keeps reviving him. He knows this cycle can't continue indefinitely, that eventually his heart will give out permanently. But he accepts this fate because those 3 minutes on his beach are the only time he has to search for his lost family. Hartman's wife and daughter died in a void-out years before the game's events. Their bodies were destroyed completely, their souls presumably passed on to the beach and beyond. But Hartman, driven by grief and love and the desperate hope that some fragment of them might remain accessible, has dedicated his existence to finding them. He's engineered his unique condition specifically for this purpose, making himself a repatriate of sorts, dying and returning repeatedly to maximize his time searching the beach. His research has made him one of the world's foremost experts on the beach, on the Death Stranding, on the nature of extinction and the connection between life and death. He's studied the previous 5 extinction entities, documented the patterns of past Death Strandings, theorized about the mechanics of how BTs form and persist. His knowledge proves invaluable to Sam's mission, providing crucial information about what Amelie truly is and what the completion of the chiral network might trigger. But beyond his scientific contributions, Hartman represents a particular kind of grief, the inability to let go of those we've lost. His 3-minute searches will never succeed. His wife and daughter are gone, moved beyond the beach to whatever lies after. Even if he found them, they couldn't return to life. His quest is ultimately futile, a man spending his entire existence chasing something that can never be reclaimed. Yet there's something profoundly human about this futility. Hartman knows, intellectually, that his searches are pointless. He's a scientist, capable of understanding that the dead don't return, that his family is gone forever. But knowing this doesn't stop him from searching. Love doesn't submit to logic or reason. The heart, as his chosen name suggests, follows its own imperatives regardless of what the mind understands to be true. Hartman's story asks whether it's better to accept loss and move forward, or to remain forever searching for what can't be recovered. The game doesn't provide a definitive answer. Hartman's dedication is both admirable and tragic, both a testament to love's power and a demonstration of how grief can trap us in repeating patterns that prevent healing. By the end of the game, Hartman makes peace with his condition and his quest. He accepts that he may never find his family, but chooses to continue searching anyway, not out of desperate hope, but out of a kind of devotion, a way of honoring their memory by refusing to completely let go. It's a mature grief, one that acknowledges loss while also maintaining connection to what was lost. The twin sisters who created the chiral network represent 2 halves of a whole, literally and figuratively separated yet still connected. Mama, whose real name is Morlingen, exists in a unique state. She's physically alive in the living world, but she's also bound to her beach through an umbilical cord that connects her to her deceased daughter. Mama's daughter was stillborn, dying before drawing breath, but instead of passing on, the infant's soul remained tethered to Mama, manifesting as a BT that only she can see and interact with. This ghost child follows Mama everywhere, and the umbilical cord binding them prevents Mama from traveling beyond a certain distance from where her daughter died. She's literally trapped, unable to leave the distribution center where she works, because doing so would sever the connection to her child. This situation is both beautiful and horrifying. Mama gets to maintain a relationship with her daughter, gets to experience motherhood despite the child's death. She talks to the infant, cares for it, refers to it as if it's alive. But this also prevents her from fully grieving, from accepting the loss and moving forward. She's trapped in a moment of death, unable to let go, physically bound to a ghost. Mama's twin sister Lochne, meanwhile, represents the other side of this coin. She lost her partner in a void-out and struggled with that loss, with the absence of someone she loved. The sisters, despite being separated by vast distances, maintain their telepathic connection, their unique form of dooms allowing them to communicate and even share sensations across the miles. The resolution of Mama's storyline is one of the game's most emotionally complex moments. To complete a crucial segment of the chiral network, Mama must sever the umbilical cord binding her to her daughter. She must let go, must choose to release the child and allow her to pass on to the beach and beyond. It's a death, a second loss of her daughter, but it's also a release, freeing both of them from the liminal state they've existed in. In doing so, Mama herself dies, her consciousness transferring to Lochne's body. The twins, separated by circumstance and distance, are reunited in a way they never expected, sharing one body, becoming a single entity again. It's strange and somewhat disturbing, raising questions about identity and selfhood. But it also represents a different kind of connection, the sisters refusing to be completely separated even by death. Mama and Lochna's story explores the theme of letting go, of how holding on to those we've lost can trap us in states between life and death. It's about the difficulty of accepting endings, the way love can become a form of imprisonment if we're unwilling to release what can no longer be held. But it's also about how connection persists in unexpected forms, how the bonds between people can survive transformation and loss. John Blake McClane, known as Die Hard Man, serves as the acting director of Bridges and becomes president of the United Cities of America after Bridget's death. He's a man haunted by his past, by decisions made during the war that killed Clifford Unger and Sam, by years of serving an organization whose true purpose he didn't fully understand until it was too late. Die Hardman wears a mask constantly, a golden face that conceals his features. He claims it's to protect his identity, to maintain operational security. But as the truth emerges, we learn the real reason. The mask hides his shame, his guilt, his inability to face what he's done. He served under Clifford Unger in the military, owes his life to Cliff's leadership and protection. And when ordered to kill Cliff, when Bridget commanded him to shoot the man who saved him countless times, he hesitated. That hesitation defined the rest of Die Hardman's life. He couldn't pull the trigger, couldn't kill his commander and friend. Bridget did it instead, shot Cliff herself while Die Hardman stood frozen. In that moment, Die Hardman's failure to act had consequences. If he'd been stronger, if he'd refused the order outright or found another way, perhaps things could have been different. But he hesitated, caught between duty and loyalty, and that hesitation allowed tragedy to unfold. After Clifford's death, Die Hardman continued serving Bridges, carrying out Bridget's orders, helping build the organization into what it became. But he did so while wearing a mask, unable to face himself or others with his true face exposed. The mask became both punishment and protection, a constant reminder of his failure and a barrier preventing anyone from seeing his shame. Throughout most of the game, Die Hardman appears as a somewhat distant authority figure, giving Sam orders, briefing him on missions, serving as the organizational voice of Bridges. But in the game's final act, when the truth about Amelie and the Last Stranding is revealed, Die Hardman removes his mask. He confesses everything to Sam, reveals the truth about Clifford and about Sam's origin as the first Bridge baby, accepts responsibility for his role in what happened. This confession, this willingness to finally face his guilt and expose himself to judgment, represents a kind of redemption. Die Hardman can't undo what happened. Clifford is dead, Sam's childhood was stolen. The consequences of those long-ago events continue to ripple forward. But by acknowledging his role, by removing the mask and accepting who he is and what he's done, Die Hardman takes the first step toward genuine accountability. After the events of the game, as the new president of the United Cities of America, Die Hardman works to guide the nation in a direction more aligned with genuine connection rather than the manipulative plans that Bridget pursued. He oversees the continued expansion of the chiral network, but now with an understanding of its dangers, with safeguards to prevent it from being weaponized again. Die Hardman's arc is about confronting past mistakes, about how guilt can become a mask we wear to avoid facing ourselves, about the difficulty and necessity of genuine accountability. He can't earn Sam's forgiveness, can't undo the damage done to Clifford and his family, but he can choose to move forward without hiding, can work to ensure that the organization he leads serves humanity rather than endangering it. The final major supporting character is Deadman, a scientist working for Bridges who specializes in repatriation, dooms, and the technology surrounding Bridge babies. Portrayed by Guillermo del Toro in appearance and Jesse Corti in voice, Deadman serves as Sam's primary point of contact throughout much of the journey, providing technical support, information, and occasional companionship through chiral-gram communications. Deadman's defining characteristic is revealed late in the game. He's not entirely human in the traditional sense. He's a construct, a body assembled from the parts of multiple deceased individuals, brought to life through technology that blurs the line between creation and resurrection. This revelation recontextualizes his entire character, his fascination with death and resurrection, his understanding of what it means to exist in a state between categories. Being artificially created gives Deadman a unique perspective on life, death, and identity. He doesn't have a single past, a unified history. He's an assemblage, multiple lives combined into one existence. This makes him particularly interested in Sam, in the mechanics of how repatriation works, in what it means to die and return. They're both in different ways people who exist outside normal categories of life and death. Deadman's role in the narrative is largely functional, providing exposition, summation, and technical support. But he also represents the question of what makes someone human, whether identity is tied to having a single continuous existence, or whether consciousness and personhood can emerge from recombination and reconstruction. His relationship with Sam is one of the game's quieter elements, a friendship that develops through repeated conversations, through shared experiences of being different from ordinary humans. Throughout Sam's journey westward, he faces opposition from a terrorist organization called Homo Demens, Latin for foolish or insane man. This group, which controls territory in the western regions of America, actively works to prevent the expansion of the chiral network and the reunification of the United Cities of America. They present themselves as freedom fighters, resisting what they see as authoritarian overreach, protecting the independence of settlements that don't want to join the UCA. But Homo Demens is more than just a political resistance movement. The organization is led by individuals suffering from severe chiral contamination, their minds warped by constant exposure to chiralium and their proximity to the beach. Many have developed nihilistic philosophies, seeing humanity as doomed, viewing the Death Stranding not as a tragedy to be prevented, but as an inevitability to be embraced or even accelerated. The face of Homo Demens and the primary antagonist for most of the game is Higgs Monaghan, portrayed by Troy Baker. Higgs is a former porter who possessed Doom's abilities that were then dramatically enhanced by Amelie. He refers to himself as the particle of God, seeing himself as the herald of extinction, the prophet of the extinction entity. Higgs's backstory is one of abuse and isolation. He grew up in a bunker, raised by an uncle who beat him whenever he asked about the outside world or tried to leave. This upbringing instilled in Higgs a deep resentment toward authority, toward anyone who would restrict freedom or impose control. When Higgs eventually killed his uncle in self-defense, he experienced his first encounter with BTS and discovered his DOOMS abilities. These powers made Higgs valuable, gave him agency and capability in a world where most people were helpless. He became a porter for Fragile Express, working alongside Fragile herself, developing both a professional partnership and a romantic relationship with her. For a time, Higgs seemed to have found purpose, seemed to be using his abilities to help connect people and rebuild society. But then he encountered Amelie, and everything changed. She revealed herself to him, explained that she was an extinction entity, shared with him the knowledge that humanity was doomed to eventual extinction. More than that, she enhanced his Doom's abilities dramatically, elevating him to a level of power he'd never imagined possible. With these enhanced abilities, Higgs could summon and control BTS, could create void-outs at will, could manipulate the tar-like substance associated with the beach. Under Amelie's influence, Higgs embraced a nihilistic philosophy. If humanity was doomed anyway, if extinction was inevitable, why resist it? Why struggle to maintain civilization, to build connections, to preserve life that would eventually be snuffed out? Better to accept the truth, to embrace the void, to accelerate the process and end the suffering quickly. This philosophy motivated Higgs's actions as the leader of Homo Demens. He orchestrated terrorist attacks not just to oppose the UCA, but to actively bring about humanity's extinction. He destroyed Central Knot City with a void-out, killing thousands, including most of the second expedition that Bridges had sent west. He attempted similar attacks on other settlements. He created the massive tar belt around Edge Knot City, isolating the west coast and preventing the completion of the chiral network. But there was also a personal element to Higgs's opposition. He was obsessed with Amelie, devoted to her in a way that went beyond ideology, and he was intensely jealous of Sam, of Amelie's clear affection for her adoptive brother. Higgs saw Sam as a rival, as someone who had Amelie's love and attention in ways that Higgs could never claim. His attacks on Sam were driven as much by this jealousy as by any philosophical commitment to extinction. Higgs's costume and persona draw heavily on ancient Egyptian symbolism, particularly their concepts of life, death, and the afterlife. He wears a golden death mask, like those of pharaohs, though as he notes, his is a mask for living, for ruling. He sees himself as a ruler of this new world, a pharaoh of the Death Stranding, someone who exists between life and death with authority over both realms. Throughout the game, Higgs appears to hold Amelie captive, to have kidnapped her and imprisoned her in Edge Knot City. He uses her as bait, as a reason for Sam to complete his journey west. But this is all theater, performance meant to disguise the truth. Amelie was never captured. She's Higgs's master, the being who gave him his enhanced powers, the extinction entity he serves as prophet and herald. Their relationship is willing collaboration, not kidnapping and imprisonment. When Sam finally reaches Edge Knot City and completes the chiral network, Higgs reveals this truth. He summons a colossal BT, a massive humanoid entity with Amelie trapped inside its chest. But even this is performance, misdirection designed to maintain the illusion of Amelie as victim, rather than architect of what's unfolding. The subsequent boss fight against this creature is visually spectacular, but narratively serves to continue the deception, making Sam believe he's rescuing Amelie from Higgs, rather than understanding that they've been working together all along. After defeating the colossal BT, Sam confronts Higgs directly on his beach, a surreal space that shifts between different war zones. This battle is as much philosophical as physical. Higgs arguing for the necessity of extinction, while Sam insists on humanity's right to continue existing. Eventually, Sam defeats Higgs, who is then stranded on the beach by Fragile, left to experience isolation and abandonment as punishment for his crimes. But even this isn't the end for Higgs. In Death Stranding 2, on the beach he returns, having spent what felt like thousands of years alone on his beach, driven even further into madness by isolation. He becomes the primary antagonist again, leading a cult that worships Amelie and seeking to bring about the extinction that was prevented in the first game. Higgs represents what happens when nihilism and power combine, when someone with abilities decides that because life ends, it has no value. His philosophy is the opposite of the game's core message. Where Death Stranding argues for connection despite inevitable endings, Higgs argues that inevitable endings make connection meaningless. He's the embodiment of despair given supernatural power, a cautionary example of how knowledge of death can corrupt someone into serving death rather than treasuring the life that precedes it. Beyond the beach and BTs, Death Stranding's world is defined by two interconnected phenomena that reshape the environment and make survival extraordinarily difficult: timefall and chiralium. These aren't merely background elements or aesthetic choices, they're fundamental aspects of how the world functions after the Death Stranding, manifestations of the bleeding boundary between life and death, between the world of matter and the realm beyond. Timefall is perhaps the most immediately apparent danger facing anyone who ventures outside. It appears as rain falling from the perpetually overcast sky that has characterized weather patterns since the Death Stranding. But this isn't normal rain. Timefall is precipitation that has been infiltrated by chiralium, exotic matter from the beach that carries the property of accelerating time on whatever it touches. When timefall strikes an object, that object rapidly ages. Metal rusts and corrodes in minutes. Plastics break down. Organic matter withers and decays. A human exposed to timefall will visibly age, skin wrinkling, hair graying, decades of deterioration compressed into moments. This makes extended exposure fatal. You can't simply weather a timefall storm and wait it out. The rain itself will kill you through accelerated aging if you remain in it long enough. The existence of timefall has transformed every aspect of how humanity survives in this world. Buildings must be designed to withstand or be regularly repaired after timefall exposure. Porters must carry equipment to protect their cargo from aging and degradation. Routes must be planned around areas with frequent timefall, or at minimum, shelters must be available where one can wait out storms. Interestingly, timefall doesn't affect everything equally. Living creatures seem somewhat more resistant than inanimate objects, though still vulnerable. Some materials degrade faster than others. There's a science to understanding what can and cannot survive timefall exposure, and that knowledge is crucial for anyone operating in the outside world. Timefall also serves as an indicator of BT presence. When BTS manifest in the living world, they bring timefall with them. The rain starts falling, often from clear skies, marking the arrival of these invisible entities. This at least provides some warning, some indication that danger is present, even if the BTS themselves remain unseen to those without DOOMS or bridge baby support. The cause of timefall relates to the concentration of chiralium in the atmosphere. Chiralium is a form of exotic matter that exists partially in the beach's timeless state and partially in the temporally bound living world. When it infiltrates ordinary matter, it brings some of that temporal distortion with it. Rain falling through chiralium-heavy air becomes timefall, carrying the beach's relationship with time down to the surface. Chiralium itself has strange properties beyond just its temporal effects. It's described as matter that exists across the boundary between the living world and the beach. It has positive mass in our world, but negative mass in the beach's realm. This dual existence makes it extraordinarily useful for certain technologies, but also inherently dangerous. The chiral network uses chiralium as its fundamental medium, routing data through chiral fields that exist partially on the beach. This is what allows instantaneous data transmission, the information traveling through a realm where time doesn't flow. Various other technologies in the world of Death Stranding utilize chiralium in different ways, from the detection equipment that helps identify BT presence to the gravitational manipulation devices that porters use to manage heavy cargo loads. But chiralium exposure has negative effects on human psychology and physiology. Extended contact causes what's called chiral contamination, a condition marked by deteriorating mental health, increased aggression, suicidal ideation, and in extreme cases, death. The members of Homo Demens suffer from severe chiral contamination, their nihilistic philosophy at least partially resulting from the mental degradation caused by constant chiralium exposure. Chiralium also concentrates in areas where voidouts have occurred, where large amounts of antimatter from BTS have reacted with the matter of the living world. These crater sites become tar belts, regions filled with thick, black, tar-like substance that seems to be partially solid and partially not, existing in a state between the beach and the living world. BTS can move through this tar freely. Humans become slowed by it, mired in a substance that shouldn't exist according to normal physics. The presence of chiralium in the environment also creates what are called chiral storms, localized distortions where the boundary between the living world and the beach becomes dangerously thin. In these storms, space and time behave unpredictably. Someone caught in a chiral storm might find themselves pulled to a different location entirely, might experience visions of past or future events, might encounter manifestations that shouldn't be possible. The interaction between timefall and chiralium represents the game's meditation on time, decay, and the inevitability of endings. In the world of Death Stranding, time has literally become weaponized. The simple passage of time, accelerated by timefall, can kill you. This serves as a metaphor for mortality itself, for how time always wins in the end, for how entropy always increases and everything eventually decays. But it's also a reminder that time is what gives things value. The limited duration of life, the fact that we age and eventually die, this is what makes the moments we have significant. If we lived forever, if time didn't affect us, would anything matter? The game suggests that meaning comes from ephemerality, from the knowledge that this moment will pass, that we won't be here forever, that the connections we form exist within the context of our shared mortality. One of Death Stranding's most distinctive features is how thoroughly its gameplay mechanics integrate with and reinforce its narrative themes. This isn't a game where the story happens in cutscenes while the gameplay involves shooting enemies or solving puzzles disconnected from the plot. Instead, nearly every mechanic, every system, every interaction serves to underscore what the game is trying to say about connection, isolation, and human persistence. The core gameplay loop involves making deliveries, carrying cargo from one location to another across difficult terrain while managing Sam's balance, stamina, and equipment. This is deliberately challenging in ways that most games aren't. Sam can trip, he can fall. The weight of his cargo affects his movement. Terrain matters enormously, with steep slopes, rivers, and rocky ground all presenting obstacles that must be carefully navigated. This difficulty is intentional and thematically meaningful. The game is saying that connection is hard work, that maintaining bonds between people requires effort and persistence, that there's no easy path to bringing isolated communities together. Every delivery Sam makes, every step he takes toward his destination is work. It's labor that matters, that has consequences, that represents a conscious choice to keep going despite obstacles. The game's asynchronous multiplayer system reinforces this theme in remarkable ways. When playing online, other players' actions affect your world and vice versa. If someone builds a ladder in a difficult-to-traverse location, that ladder appears in your game, helping you navigate the same terrain. If you build a bridge across a river, other players will see that bridge and benefit from your effort. This creates a sense of community and shared purpose without requiring direct interaction. You're helping people you'll never meet, leaving tools and structures that make their journeys easier. And they're doing the same for you, constructing roads, leaving supplies at safe houses, marking dangerous areas with signs. The world gradually becomes easier to traverse as more players contribute, as the cumulative efforts of thousands of porters create infrastructure that benefits everyone. This mirrors the game's narrative themes about how civilization itself is built on such shared efforts, how we all benefit from work done by people we'll never know, how progress happens through collective action rather than individual heroism. Sam might be the protagonist, but he's not alone in his mission. Countless other porters are making their own deliveries, building their own structures, contributing to the project of reconnecting America. The game also features a likes system, where delivering packages, building structures, or helping other players earns you likes from both NPCs and other players. This gamifies social approval in ways that initially seem shallow, but gradually reveal a deeper point. We do crave recognition for our efforts. We want to know that the work we do matters to someone, that our contributions are seen and valued. The likes system acknowledges this human need for validation, while also suggesting that such validation shouldn't be the primary motivation for helping others. BT encounters, where Sam must hold his breath and carefully navigate around invisible entities or fight them using weapons loaded with his bodily fluids, reinforce the game's themes about death and connection. The fact that Sam's blood, his literal life essence, is what can drive away or destroy BTs suggests that life itself is the antithesis to death, that connection to living processes is what protects against the pull of oblivion. The bridge, baby mechanics, where Sam must soothe Lou when the child becomes stressed, where he can rock the pod to calm the infant or connect to it to improve their bond, force players to engage with the ethical complications the narrative presents. You're using this child as equipment, as a tool to detect threats. But the game also requires you to care for Lou, to respond to the child's needs, to develop a relationship rather than treating the BB as mere technology. This creates a cognitive dissonance that's intentional and important. You become attached to Lou despite knowing the ethical problems with the BB program. You form a bond with this child that you're using as equipment. And when the game finally gives you the choice to save Lou rather than following protocol, most players make that choice instantly, because of the relationship they've developed through gameplay, not just through cutscenes. The carrying capacity system, where Sam can only transport so much cargo at once, forces decisions about what to prioritize. Do you take multiple smaller deliveries or focus on one large important package? Do you bring extra equipment for safety or minimize weight to move faster? These logistical puzzles might seem mundane, but they represent the real choices that maintaining connections requires. You can't do everything. You have to prioritize, and those priorities reveal what you value, what you think matters most. Even the game's rest mechanics, where Sam must occasionally stop to sleep, to relieve himself, to drink water, reinforce that he's human. that maintaining his ability to function requires addressing basic biological needs. He's not a superhuman action hero who can run indefinitely without rest. He's a porter, a worker, someone whose body requires maintenance and care to keep performing. The private room sequences, where Sam can interact with his equipment, change his appearance, read emails, and take care of various personal tasks, provide moments of quiet reflection between deliveries. These moments might seem like simple gameplay downtime, but they serve an important narrative function. They show Sam gradually becoming more connected to the world around him, engaging more with the messages from others, softening in ways that reflect his character growth. The music system, where specific songs play during key moments of travel, often gentle, melancholic tracks by artists like Low Roar, creates emotional peaks that transform simple traversal into something more meaningful. You're not just walking across terrain, you're on a journey, capital J, with all the symbolic weight that word carries. The music signals this, elevates the act of moving from one place to another into something approaching the sacred. By integrating its narrative themes so thoroughly into its gameplay systems, Death Stranding creates a holistic experience where mechanics and story reinforce each other constantly. You're not playing a game about connection, you're actively participating in creating connections through every action you take. You're not watching a story about isolation and community, you're experiencing what it means to move from isolated individual to part of a larger whole. Death Stranding is, at its core, a meditation on connection, isolation, and what it means to persist in the face of inevitable death. The game's narrative, gameplay, and thematic elements all converge on a single central question. In a world where death has become weaponized, where connection carries inherent danger, where isolation seems like the only safe option, how do we choose to live? The game's answer is unambiguous. We choose connection. We build strands between ourselves and others, even knowing those strands make us vulnerable. We form bonds, create communities, reach out across divides, not because it's safe or easy, but because the alternative, remaining isolated and emotionally dead, is worse than any physical danger. This theme manifests in every aspect of the game. The gameplay loop of making deliveries, of carrying cargo from one settlement to another, is literally about creating connections, about bringing isolated communities the resources they need to survive. The chiral network that Sam works to complete is a technological manifestation of this theme, a system designed to link people together despite the physical dangers that separate them. The characters Sam encounters all embody different responses to isolation and connection. Fragile, betrayed, and scarred, still chooses to help others, to maintain her delivery company, to build connections despite her trauma. Heartman searches endlessly for his lost family, refusing to accept that some connections can't be restored. Mama literally binds herself to her deceased daughter, unable to let go of that connection even when it traps her. Sam himself transforms over the course of the game from someone who avoids all connection to someone who embraces it fully. His aphenphosphobia, his fear of physical touch, represents the emotional walls he's built to protect himself from loss. Breaking down those walls, learning to care about others again, accepting the vulnerability that comes with connection. This is Sam's true journey, more significant than any physical distance he covers. The bridge babies represent the most disturbing manifestation of the game's themes. These children are literally used as tools to create connections, to bridge the gap between the living and the dead, so that humans can perceive BTS. The ethics of treating children as equipment are never fully resolved, which is intentional. It forces players to sit with the discomfort of using Lou as a tool while gradually forming an emotional connection with her, mirroring Sam's own journey. The beach itself functions as the ultimate connection, the liminal space that links all of humanity in death. But it's also a place of isolation where individual beaches exist separately, where souls can be trapped alone forever. The tension between the beach's connection and the beach's isolation reflects the game's broader themes about how the same mechanisms that bring us together can also trap us. Extinction, the game argues, isn't just physical annihilation. It's also the death of connection, the complete isolation that comes from severing all bonds with others. Amelie's desire to trigger the last stranding stems partly from her own isolation, her existence on a beach separated from all human contact. She sees extinction as mercy because she's experienced the pain of being cut off, of existing without connection. Sam must convince her that even temporary connection is better than eternal isolation. The game also explores the relationship between technology and connection. The chiral network promises to bring people together, to restore communication and community. But it's also the mechanism by which extinction nearly occurs. Proof that tools meant to connect can be weaponized, that progress carries dangers we don't always anticipate. This isn't an argument against technology or connection, but a reminder that both require care, consciousness, and ethical consideration. Death Stranding doesn't offer simple answers or easy resolutions. The world remains dangerous at the game's conclusion. BTS still threaten anyone who ventures outside. The threat of extinction has been delayed but not eliminated. Sam's choice to save Lou is presented as right and necessary, but the game never fully addresses the broader ethical implications of the BB program or whether similar choices are made for other BBS. This ambiguity is intentional. The game presents connection not as a solution that fixes everything, but as a choice we must continue to make every day, despite the risks and complications. It's not about achieving some perfect state where danger is eliminated and connection is easy. It's about choosing to build and maintain strands even when it's difficult, even when it makes us vulnerable, because the alternative is unacceptable. The title Death Stranding carries multiple meanings, all interconnected. It refers to the cataclysmic event that shattered the world, to the phenomenon of souls becoming trapped between life and death, to the marine creatures beached and dying on shores around the world, to the state of being stranded and isolated. But strand also means rope, connection, the threads that bind us together. Death Stranding is what separates us, but our strands are what reconnect us. As we conclude this exploration of Death Stranding's complete story and lore, it's worth reflecting on why this game resonates so powerfully despite, or perhaps because of, its convoluted narrative and philosophical density. In a world that often feels increasingly isolated, where digital connection paradoxically leaves us feeling more alone, where global crises make physical connection dangerous, Death Stranding's argument for the necessity of connection feels urgent and relevant. The game suggests that we are, fundamentally, creatures who need each other. That isolation, while sometimes necessary for survival, is a temporary measure rather than a permanent solution. That the strands we build between ourselves and others are what give life meaning, even when those strands make us vulnerable to pain and loss. That choosing connection over isolation is an act of defiance against the forces, both cosmic and personal, that push toward entropy and dissolution. Sam's journey from isolated porter to connected father, from someone running from relationships to someone willing to risk everything for them, is a journey we all must make in various forms throughout our lives. We all experience loss. We all build walls to protect ourselves, and we all must eventually choose whether to maintain those walls or risk taking them down, whether to remain safe but alone or vulnerable but connected. Death Stranding argues ultimately that the choice to connect is what makes us human, that in the face of inevitable death, in a world filled with dangers visible and invisible, the right response isn't to isolate ourselves but to reach out, to build bridges, to create strands that bind us to each other. These connections won't save us from death. Nothing can, but they give the time between birth and death meaning, purpose, value. The game's ending, where Sam saves Lou and chooses to become a father rather than following protocol, encapsulates this message perfectly. He's choosing connection despite knowing it will make him vulnerable, despite understanding that loving someone means accepting the possibility of losing them. He's creating a strand, building a relationship, forming a bond that will define the rest of his life. And in that choice, in that moment of deciding that another person matters more than his own safety or his desire to remain isolated, Sam completes the transformation that the entire game has been building toward. He becomes someone who understands that connection, despite all its dangers and difficulties, is what makes existence worth the effort. He becomes someone who chooses to keep on keeping on, not just for himself, but for others, not just to survive, but to truly live. Thank you for joining me on this extensive journey through the lore of Death Stranding. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of gaming's most enigmatic narratives, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more content, exploring the stories and worlds of your favorite games. Until next time, keep building those strands, keep making those connections, and keep on keeping on.